If you're planning to set foot in New Zealand, check the soles of your shoes first, not a speck of dirt allowed. Biosecurity officers here don't just glance at your boots. Tents, hiking gear, anything that's touched the outdoors gets inspected, and dirty ones get pulled aside on the spot. It's not bureaucracy for its own sake. It's how this country has kept its wilderness this intact. Vast forests, jagged coastlines, and rare species still thrive here. For all that wilderness, New Zealand doesn't have a single native snake. Good news, if you're the kind of traveler who'd rather watch the scenery than the ground. For now, let's go with us to find out what makes this place so different. Our first stop is Milford Sound. Rudyard Kipling once called it the eighth wonder of the world, and the fjord is the undisputed star of Fiordland National Park. Walls of rock rise over 1,200 meters straight out of the water here, carved by glaciers that spent millions of years grinding through solid stone. Meter Peak is the one everyone points to, climbing 1,700 meters almost straight up from the sea. But it's the water that never stops moving. After rain, and it rains often, over 6,400 millimeters a year, hundreds of waterfalls appear out of nowhere, pouring off cliffs that were bare the day before. Two of them never stop: Lady Bowen Falls at 162 meters and Stirling Falls just behind it. The road in runs through the Homer Tunnel, the only way to reach a fjord like this by car anywhere in New Zealand. Beyond the water, the land keeps climbing. Mossy beach forest, open river valleys, fields of wild lupine color beneath the peaks. Higher still, the ridgelines turn to bare rock and snow, looking down over the same fjord from thousands of feet above. Boats trace the same route the glaciers once carved, hugging cliffs that drop straight into black water. Rain or shine, Milford Sound rewrites itself every day. Before we head to the next spot, here's a fun question. Which bird is the national symbol of New Zealand? Comment your answer. Kaikōura means to eat crayfish in Maori, but the name barely hints at what's actually happening here. This is a place where the seaward Kaikōura Range doesn't ease down toward the water. It rises straight out of the ridgeline while the surf works the rocks below. Captain Cook called the peninsula "lookers on" when he passed in 1770, as if even from a ship it looked like the land was watching the sea. Offshore, the ground drops away fast. The Kaikōura Canyon starts in just 30 meters of water and plunges to 600, then close to 2,000, all within about a kilometer of the coast. That's rare anywhere on Earth, and it's why sperm whales stay in these waters year-round instead of passing through. On land, the shoreline itself is unusually young. In November 2016, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake lifted this coast out of the sea, by about a meter at the peninsula, by several meters elsewhere, leaving pale new rock platforms exposed to the sun for the first time. Fur seals have claimed those platforms since, spread along the peninsula's edge, while spotted shags line the rocks further out. Inland, the Kohai River has spent centuries doing the slow work of flooding and rebuilding the shingle plain that ties the peninsula to the mainland. Mountains, canyon, and a coastline still settling into its new shape, Kaikōura sits right where all three meet. Nowhere else quite works this way. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing destinations and unforgettable journeys. Steam rises quietly from the ground here, curling up even in the middle of a city park, as if the earth never quite settles. Rotorua sits inside the Rotorua caldera, a crater carved out by a massive eruption nearly 240,000 years ago, now filled by the lake that carries its name. Lake Rotorua spreads across almost 80 square kilometers, making it the second largest lake in New Zealand's North Island. Around its shores, quiet neighborhoods and rolling green farmland stretch out calmly, as if nothing unusual were happening underground. But nothing here is quite ordinary. Just past the rooftops, mineral pools glow turquoise, green, and orange, tucked into a landscape still actively shaped by hot springs, boiling mud, and spouting geysers. At Taupo, the champagne pool holds colors so bright and layered they look almost painted on. Nearby, the Pohutu geyser at Te Puia can erupt up to 20 times a day, throwing water 30 meters straight into the sky. Back in the city center, the old bathhouse still stands in the government gardens, its Tudor towers looking almost out of place beside the steam drifting quietly past. It opened in 1908, built on 50 acres of land gifted by Ngāti Whakawe nearly 3 decades earlier, given, as they put it, for the benefit of the people of the world. Rotorua itself was settled in the early 1870s and has been growing steadily along this lakeshore ever since. A geyser field and a bowling green sit only blocks apart, and somehow, that's simply how Rotorua works. We worked really hard to make these videos, and of course, your support is a huge motivation. If you love us, you can scan the QR code here to buy us a cup of coffee. A single willow rises out of the water at the southern edge of Lake Wānaka, not planted for beauty, but as a fence post that simply refused to die. It took root, grew branches, and in 2014, a misty photograph of it by Dennis Radermacher won New Zealand Geographic's Photo of the Year, turning an accidental fence post into the country's most photographed tree. Behind it, the lake stretches about 45 kilometers, carved by glaciers more than 10,000 years ago, into New Zealand's fourth largest body of water. At its deepest point, it drops 311 meters, far colder and darker than anything visible from the shore. Meltwater from the Makaurora and Matukituki rivers feeds it from those same mountains, and everything the lake holds eventually drains south through the Clutha River. The southern Alps close the horizon on two sides, snow lingering on their ridgelines long after summer arrives below. A scatter of small islands breaks the surface farther out. Ruby Island, Stevenson's, Mutapu, and Muwaho. Above it all, Roy's Peak climbs to 1,578 meters, its summit trail delivering one of the most photographed panoramas in New Zealand. That view comes with a catch. Even the Department of Conservation admits parking at the trailhead runs out fast once summer crowds arrive. It's much the same story down in Wānaka itself. Travelers often say the town packs plenty worth seeing into a small footprint, but nowhere near enough parking to match it. Many describe a council quick to ticket any car left in the wrong spot, so reaching the lakefront often means a longer walk than planned. Even so, the town settles gently along the shoreline, framed by mountains that make almost every angle of Lake Wānaka look deliberate. I'm curious, what time is it where you're watching from? And which country are you joining me from today? These layers look like a giant's breakfast left out along the coast. The stack began nearly 30 million years ago, when the shells of countless tiny marine creatures settled on the seafloor and slowly hardened into limestone, hard and soft layers pressed one over another for millions of years. Earthquakes eventually lifted that ancient seabed high above the waves. Then rain, wind, and the relentless Tasman Sea went to work on the softer layers, cutting out the narrow pillars and ridges that still stand here today. The sea isn't finished with this place. At Dolomite Point, it still forces its way through hidden channels beneath the rock, and where the pressure finally has nowhere left to go, it erupts skyward through blowholes with a sound like rolling thunder. This whole stretch of coast sits inside Paparoa National Park, on New Zealand's wild and rugged west coast. A single paved path winds along the headland above it all, the only way in and the only way through. More people stop here than at almost any other natural site on this coast. You can see the stacked layers close enough to count each one, but the barrier keeps you exactly there. The rock itself always stays just out of reach. The rule protects the rock as much as it protects the visitor. Climbing is banned here to keep the fragile ledges from crumbling and to protect the seabirds nesting in the cracks. So the view here was never meant to be something you walk through. It's something you walk beside, close enough to see everything, near enough to touch nothing at all. Snow catches the first light long before the valley floor does. Beneath it, tussock and scrub roll out for miles, cut only by a thin river finding its own way down. Three volcanoes rise here: Ruapehu, Ngauruhoe, and Tongariro, still active, still capable of reshaping the ground beneath them. Ngauruhoe's near-perfect cone last erupted in 1975, and its shape is instantly familiar to anyone who's seen it play Mount Doom on screen. Nothing about that softens what it is. Cross into the higher country, and the color drains out of the world. Gray scoria, bare rock, a crater floor with nothing growing in it at all. Then the ground exhales. Steam lifts off the rocks near Red Crater, a quiet reminder that this mountain has erupted within the last 100 years, most recently in 2012. Lower down, the Tama Lakes hold a color that looks almost artificial, tinted by minerals bleeding out of the thermal ground around them. Elsewhere in the park, water finds cracks in old volcanic rock and spills straight down into waterfalls, cutting through the one green corner. To the Ngāti Tūwharetoa, these peaks aren't scenery, they're ancestors, held sacred long before anyone called this a park. Fire and ice, sacred ground and raw rock, sitting on top of each other like they were never meant to be separate. Queenstown sits where the mountains stop pretending to be gentle. Below Coronet Peak and the jagged wall of the Remarkables, Lake Wakatipu stretches nearly 80 kilometers, carved by glaciers into a valley too deep, too narrow to look ordinary. The Remarkables climb past 2,300 meters, sharp enough that early settlers named them for how unusual their silhouette looked against the sky. Down at the water's edge, the town spreads along the shoreline in a patchwork of streets and rooftops, hemmed in by pine-covered slopes. It wasn't always this calm. Gold turned this quiet farming valley into a rush town in 1862, and a year later it was renamed Queenstown, fit for a queen, according to legend. That restless energy never left. It just changed shape into what the world now calls the adventure capital. High on Bob's Peak, a gravity-powered luge track cuts more than 1,600 meters of banked corners and dips down the hillside Honokawara Bridge outside town. The world's first commercial bungee jump opened in 1988, turning a 43-meter drop over the gorge into an entire industry. Nearby, the Shotover River squeezes into canyons barely wider than a boat, where jet boats cut through inches of water at up to 90 kilometers an hour. Out on the lake, the TSS Earnslaw still runs the route it has since 1912, a coal-fired steamship once taken apart and rebuilt right on these shores. Mountains, gold, water, speed. Queenstown keeps finding new ways to be the same restless place it's always been. The road to Aoraki cuts a straight line through green farmland, the southern Alps rising white and jagged at the far end. That road is State Highway 80, and it ends here, at the base of the tallest mountain in New Zealand. Locals call it Aoraki, the cloud piercer, and most days the peak lives up to the name, wrapped in its own weather. At 3,724 meters, it's flanked on one side by the Hooker Glacier and on the other by the Tasman, the longest glacier in the country. The lakes fed by that ice carry a color that doesn't look real. Pukaki's turquoise comes from rock ground so fine by the glaciers that it stays suspended in the water, scattering blue and green light back up. Follow the water upstream, and the glacier itself comes into view, a wall of blue-white ice dropping straight into a lake that barely existed a few decades ago, before the retreat sped up. More than 140 peaks inside this park top 2,000 meters, and 72 named glaciers cover close to half of it. Down in the valley, gravel trails follow the rivers toward the mountain, one of them leading to a lookout just 10 kilometers from the summit. The rivers themselves braid and split across the gravel flats, more channel than river, carrying meltwater down from glaciers most visitors never reach on foot. From higher up, the valley opens into full view, glacier, lake, and the jagged ridgeline that closes it in, all visible in a single sweep. Cloud rolls in fast here too, dropping over the ridges and softening the whole valley to gray before it lifts again just as quickly as the light fades. The mountain turns gold before the cloud closes back over it, and the lake below goes still, ice floating quiet at the edge of the water. In New Zealand's Mackenzie Basin, one lake looks like it's lit from underneath. This is Lake Tekapo, Taupo in Maori, a name that roughly translates to "leave in haste at night." At 83 square kilometers, rimmed by the southern Alps, It sits 710 meters up, held back by a wall of glacial moraine. The color isn't a filter. It's rock flour, fine glacial silt ground down by the Classen, Grey and Godley glaciers, and carried in by the Godley River. The particles never settle. They hang suspended just under the surface, scattering sunlight back as turquoise. Depending on the season and how much meltwater is running, the water shifts from pale ice blue to a saturated, almost electric green. Along the banks, larch and willow turn gold in autumn, framing water that never changes with them. Every early summer, Russell lupins, tall spires of purple, pink, and blue, crowd the roadside and lake edge, though they aren't native. They arrived in New Zealand less than a century ago. Small enough to miss from a distance, the Church of the Good Shepherd sits right where the shoreline meets the grass. It was built in 1935 from unchipped local stone, a memorial to the region's earliest settlers. Even the boulders around it were left exactly where they lay. Above it all, snowmelt keeps arriving from the same mountains, season after season, refilling the color as fast as it fades. If you've visited this place before, comment 1. If you haven't, comment 2. Deep in the forest, McLean Falls drops 22 meters over a series of stone terraces on the Taupo River. Follow the water out, and it slows into the Owaka River, 30 kilometers of it, sharing its estuary with the Catlins River. Further along the coast, the cliffs fold into narrow green coves, water pushing into gaps barely wide enough for a boat. Offshore, wave-worn rock islets rise out of the sea. Locals call them the nuggets, said to resemble gold. They sit inside a 47-hectare scientific reserve, watched over by a 9-meter stone lighthouse that stood here since 1869. It was first lit on July 4, 1870, its beam still sweeping out from 76 meters above the water. One road holds this whole region together, the Southern Scenic Route, the only major route through it. Green hills roll into more green hills, sheep scattered loose across the slopes. It's dairy farming and fishing that keep the economy running. Between December and February, elephant seals haul out on these same beaches near the nuggets to rest. From above, the Catlins still being shaped by whatever tide comes in next. This information was compiled from multiple sources. If there are any inaccuracies, please share your suggestions in the comments below. The Bay of Islands opens up as a maze of green headlands and turquoise water, more than 140 islands scattered across a coastline that stretches nearly 500 miles from end to end. This place was once a drowned valley, an old river system the sea slowly swallowed over thousands of years, leaving hills as islands and valleys as channels beneath the surface. That history is written into every shape below, every ridge that once was dry land. Mist sometimes settles low over the water here, and the islands seem to float above it rather than sit on it, their outlines fading in and out of the haze. Below the surface, rocky reefs break the current, dark stone ringed in white foam, and impossibly clear turquoise water. Small settlements like Paihia and Karakari sit tucked into the coastline, their rooftops barely visible under the trees, framed by hills that roll straight down to the shore. A river winds inland past the towns, slipping quietly beneath the hills before reaching the sea, its surface catching the last light of the day. Out past Cape Brett, where the peninsula pushes 10 kilometers into the Pacific, the bay opens into open ocean, the water changing color as it deepens. Boats gather in sheltered coves, anchored in water so clear the seabed shows through, still against the wide curve of the bay. Captain Cook charted this bay in 1769 and gave it the name it still carries today. "70 years later, in 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed on these shores, the document that founded modern New Zealand. Land and sea have been shaping each other here for centuries, and from the air, that story is still visible in every bay, every channel, and every quiet stretch of coastline. This is New Zealand's largest city, a city that was never meant to be flat. Auckland sits on a field of nearly 50 dormant volcanoes, and even its skyline can't quite hide it. The land keeps pushing through. At the center of it all, the Sky Tower reaches 328 meters into the sky, the tallest structure in the country, finished in 1997. From up there, the city reveals what it really is: water on every side. Auckland is framed by two harbors, the Waitemata to the east and the Manukau to the west, and that geography earned it a nickname, the City of Sails. More boats per person than almost anywhere else in the world. Below, the harbor bridge stretches over a kilometer across the Waitemata, carrying traffic that's crossed here since 1959. Inland, the Auckland domain holds one of the city's oldest volcanic craters, and on its slopes sits the War Memorial Museum, a neoclassical building finished in 1929, built to remember and still watching over the harbor it was placed to overlook. Further out, the coastline turns wilder, black sand meeting white surf where the land runs out of room. Ferries slide in and out of the viaduct all day, past glass towers and old stone facades standing side by side. Night falls and the sky tower keeps glowing, a fixed point above a city that never quite sits still. "85 kilometers of rugged land reach north from the Bay of Plenty, forming the spine of the Coromandel Peninsula. It's less a coastline than a wall, one raised by old volcanoes standing between the open Pacific and the sheltered waters of the Aoraki Gulf. On one side, deep blue rolls in unbroken from the ocean. On the other, the water softens to turquoise, folded into calm bays and harbors. Maori call it Te Tara o Te Ika a Maui, the barb of Maui's fish, the hook said to have pulled the North Island up from the sea. Forest climbs the ranges, up toward nearly 900 meters at Mohau in the north. Down at the shoreline, the land keeps breaking apart into inlets, headlands, and small towns tucked wherever the coast allows. Boats sit anchored in the stillness of the harbors, the water beneath them almost too clear to read as deep. Elsewhere, the cliffs turn pale and volcanic, cut straight down into the water by waves that never stopped working at them. At Cathedral Cove, that patience shows its most famous result, an archway carved clean through the rock over some 7,500 years. Walk beneath it, and the cove opens into white sand and green water, boxed in by cliff on either side. It sits inside an 840-hectare marine reserve, and something like 150,000 people make the walk out to see this one arch every year. Peninsula, harbor, headland, arch, it's the same process everywhere here, land giving the sea just a little more of itself, on no schedule but its own. Christchurch calls itself the Garden City, and from above the reason is obvious. Flat green fields stretch toward the hills, flooded silver in places where recent rain has settled. A few streets over, a row of golden trees lines a quiet park, their leaves turned bright yellow by autumn above picnic tables and a small playground. Not far off, steel trusses rise into a fully covered arena, The new $683 million stadium at Tekapo opened in March 2026 with room for 30,000 people. A few blocks away sits the cardboard cathedral, its triangular stained glass front lit up at night, built from 98 cardboard tubes and 8 steel shipping containers by architect Shigeru Ban after the magnitude 6.3 earthquake of February 2011, which killed 185 people and shattered the original cathedral downtown. In Cathedral Square, the Victorian buildings that survived still stand. The city remembers, but it keeps building anyway. The rebuilt skyline spreads out toward a ring of hills on the horizon, the eroded rim of an old volcano. Those port hills separate the city from Lyttelton Harbor, where the first Canterbury settlers came ashore by ship back in 1850. Back along the Avon River, the Ferrier Fountain throws water from 3-tiered spheres beside the Christchurch Town Hall, a gift from a local couple to mark the hall's opening. A short walk into Victoria Square is the Bowker Fountain, lit by electricity since 1931, the first of its kind in the Southern Hemisphere. Christchurch abounds with arts, adventure, and optimism. Most capital cities sprawl outward without much thought. Wellington never really had that option. Wedged onto a narrow strip of land between a deep natural harbor and steep green hills, it's one of the smallest capitals in the world and, weather-wise, one of the loudest. This is officially the windiest city on the entire planet, with an average wind speed of around 27 kilometers an hour year after year. On close to 173 days out of the year, gusts here hit full gale force, funneled straight through Cook Strait, the narrow passage between New Zealand's 2 main islands. Down on Lambton Quay, though, the city just gets on with it, business as usual. At the center of government sits the Beehive, the country's executive wing, designed by Scottish architect Basil Spence, and finally finished in 1981 after more than a decade of on and off construction. Ten stories of rounded concrete, standing right beside the older, far more traditional Parliament buildings. Above the city, rows of colonial villas cling to the hillsides, looking down over terraced rooftops toward the water below. Near the harbor mouth, the cake tin rises where old railway land used to sit. A stadium built to hold 34,500 people opened at the very start of the year 2000. Out past the wharves, the coastline turns rugged fast, waves breaking hard and constant against exposed rock. Wellington is the southernmost capital city anywhere on Earth, and out on the calm water, It doesn't always feel like it's trying very hard to prove that. Taranaki rises from the plains in one unbroken line, so symmetrical that Taranaki's own Civil Defense Authority calls it one of the most symmetrical volcanic cones in the world. At 2,518 meters, it's the second highest peak on New Zealand's North Island, after Mount Ruapehu. Around its base, a ring of dark native forest stops in an almost perfect circle, farmland pressing right against the tree line, a boundary drawn back in 1881, 6 miles out from the summit, and it's barely moved since. Climb into the clouds and the ridgelines go quiet. On clear mornings, hikers cross above a sea of cloud settled below them like a second landscape. Streams born in the snowfields near the summit cut down through gorges, feeding waterfalls like Dawson Falls, which drops 18 meters through native forest. At the top, a crater holds snow through most of the year, even while the farmland far below stays green. Getting there takes real effort, 4 to 5 hours of steady, unrelenting climbing, much of it over loose scree. That scree turns dangerous on the way down. It's slick enough that even the fittest hikers, the self-described mountain goats among them, lose their footing on the descent. The advice locals give is simple: start early, before the cloud rolls in, so the summit is still visible once you reach it. Reach the top on a clear day, though, and Taranaki gives back every bit of the climb it demanded. Color is the first thing that strikes you here. A blue too electric to look natural, hear me. This is Lake Taupo, the largest lake in New Zealand, spread across 616 square kilometers of the North Island's center. It fills the caldera of a volcano still very much alive beneath it. At its deepest point, the water drops 186 meters, deep enough to swallow whatever quiet violence once shaped it. Towns wrap around its edges instead of crowding it, small clusters of rooftops giving way again and again to open shoreline. On a clear day, the horizon answers back. 3 snow-capped volcanoes, Ruapehu, Nauruhoe, and Tongariro, standing far to the south. Out on the water, boats leave the only marks the surface allows, thin white lines that vanish behind them. Along Mine Bay, a cliff face holds something else entirely, a 14-meter carving of Ngātoroirangi, the navigator said to have led his people here over 1,000 years ago. It was cut by hand in the 1970s, by a carver and 4 others, with nothing modern about the process. At the lake's northern edge, the water finds its only way out, the Waikato River, New Zealand's longest. It narrows hard at Huka Falls, squeezed from 100 meters wide down to 15, and comes through white and fast. Come morning, mist sits low on the surface, and the lake looks like it hasn't decided yet whether to wake up. This is Stewart Island, the far southern piece of New Zealand that most people forget is even there. Just 30 kilometers of open water separate it from the South Island, across a stretch of sea called the Fovo Strait. From above, headland after headland rolls out and disappears into low cloud, dense forest pressing right down to the waterline, as if the land refuses to stop growing. Almost the whole island, 85% of it, is protected as Kaikōura National Park, one unbroken stretch of wilderness. Inland, the hills climb steadily toward Mount Anglum, 980 meters at its peak, the highest ground anywhere on the island. The coastline folds in on itself for over 160 kilometers, carving out deep, sheltered inlets like Patterson Inlet and Port Pegasus. Long, empty beaches and wind-blown dunes sit right up against dense native forest, the two landscapes meeting with almost no space in between. In Maori, the island is called Rakiura, glowing skies, a name earned by the aurora that occasionally lights up its remote southern nights. Captain Cook sailed past in 1770 and, from a distance, mistook the entire island for nothing more than a peninsula. Down at Half Moon Bay, the only real settlement quietly waits, a small harbor town called Oban, boats resting at anchor in the calm water below the surrounding hills. Fewer than 500 people live here year-round, and fishing still shapes daily life on the island as much as tourism ever has. Rakiura only became a national park in 2002, the newest in the entire country, and still one of its wildest corners. Golden Bay on one side, Tasman Bay on the other, this stretch of coastline sits pinched between the two, right at the very top of New Zealand's South Island. From the air, forested ridgelines dropping straight into water that shifts from pale teal to deep, saturated blue within just a few hundred meters. It's the smallest national park in the entire country, only 237 square kilometers, but it doesn't feel small at all once you're looking down on it. The coast folds in on itself again and again, headland, bay, each curve carrying its own shade of water and its own shape of sand. Some beaches curve into tight, golden crescents, barely wide enough to hold the tide line. Others stretch wide and flat, exposed at low tide into rippled sand and sheets of water, so still they work like a mirror. Granite boulders sit stacked right at the shoreline in places, rounded smooth by centuries of wind, rain, and salt. Inland, the forest closes in dense and unbroken, dropping steep and green toward the water's edge without a gap. A single coastal path threads through all of it for 60 kilometers, cutting quietly under the canopy before opening back onto open sea. Small islands sit just offshore, scattered along the coast, Tonga Island among them. Clouds move fast here, 1 hour heavy and gray over the ridgelines, the next split wide open with light hitting the water directly. This is a park built almost entirely at the edge, where forest, sand, and sea never quite manage to let go of each other. Round stones the size of small boats lie scattered across Koekohe Beach. These are the Moeraki boulders, gray septarian concretions with cracks running through them. They began forming on the seafloor nearly 60 million years ago. Some are still half buried in the cliffs, waiting for the sea to finish what it started. Maori legend ties them to the wreck of the great canoe, Aoraki, the boulders said to be its washed-ashore food baskets and gourds. Follow the coast south of the township, and the land narrows into Katiki Point. This stretch of shoreline holds the largest yellow-eyed penguin colony on the South Island. Their Maori name, Hoiho, means noise shouter, and they're counted among the rarest penguins on Earth, with only around 30 nests holding on here. "60 million years of stone, and a handful of nests still fighting to survive. Moeraki holds both extremes of time." Surfacing stones that took millions of years to form, and sheltering one of the last places a vanishing bird still calls home. With its dramatic landscapes and rich Maori culture, New Zealand is far more than just a destination. It's an experience for the soul. We hope this gave you a glimpse into the beauty that awaits across these islands. Whether you are chasing adventure in Queenstown or seeking peace in the Bay of Islands, That's our roundup of the incredible places to visit in New Zealand. We're so glad you joined us until the very end of this journey. See you in the next video.